St. Petersburg is the second largest city of Russia, and it has played a vital role in Russian history since its founding in 1703. Architecturally, it ranks as one of the most splendid cities in Europe. On August 22nd, we were bused to Tsarskoye Selo, also known as Pushkin, a town located 30 kilometers south from the center of St. Petersburg proper, for the much-awaited visit to Catherine Palace, the Rococo summer residence of the Russian Tsars. The residence originated in 1717, when Catherine I of Russia ordered the construction of a summer palace for her pleasure. In 1733, Empress Elizabeth had the Catherine Palace expanded, however found her mother's residence outdated, and in May 1752 she asked her court architect Bartolomeo Rastrelli to demolish the old structure and replace it with a much grander edifice in a flamboyant Rococo style. Construction lasted for 4 years. The main staircase occupies the entire height and width of the palace and is lit by 3 tiers of windows on both east and west. The white marble steps ascend from both sides to a central landing, from which 4 flights rise to the first floor where the staterooms are located. The upper landings of the staircase are adorned by restored marble sculptures of Cupid sleeping and Cupid awakening that were carved by Viktor Brodsky in 1860 by the order of Empress Maria Feodorovna, the spouse of Alexander II. The Great Hall is the largest state room in the palace. The stylish hall, with a floor area of over 800 square meters, was intended as the venue for official receptions and celebrations, banquets and balls. The antechambers were located before the Great Hall and were intended as places for people to wait before audiences and the public appearances of the Empress. The Chevalier dining room is not particularly large, and so the architect placed mirrors and false windows containing mirrors on the walls, making the hall spacious and bright. In the center of the white state dining room is an oval table covered with elaborately draped tablecloths, decorated with garlands of flowers laid with an exquisite porcelain service that was made at the famous Meissen factory in Germany. The walls of the adjoining crimson and green pilaster rooms are adorned by pilasters containing clear glass backed by red and green metallic foil, hence the names of the two rooms. The portrait hall displays large formal portraits of Empress Elizabeth Petrovna and Catherine I. The picture hall displays paintings acquired by artist George Gruth on the orders of Empress Elizabeth in Prague and Hamburg. The small white dining room features a stove with Hamburg tiles, mirrors in carved and gilded frames, and a patterned parquet floor, traditional elements of Baroque decor. The pantry displays Baroque armchairs as well as this French marquetry chest of drawers from the 18th century. The Chinese drawing room of Alexander I displays the furnishings and paintings that survived the war evacuation, like these portraits by unknown artists of Peter the Great and Catherine I, and of their daughters Anne and Elizabeth. Also on display are portraits of Catherine II and Alexander I. The green dining room walls are embellished with white molded ornaments, figures of girls in ancient dresses, Greek vases and grapevines. The items of this exquisitely colored table service are embellished with the owner's monograms. The Amber Room is a world-famous chamber decorated in amber panels backed with gold leaf and mirrors. Unfortunately, photography was not allowed during our visit, so I have captured some pictures from the internet to complete my travelogue. Originally constructed in the 18th century in Prussia, the Amber Room disappeared during World War II and was recreated in 2003. Before the room was lost, it was considered an eighth wonder of the world. The Alexander Park, with an area of around 200 hectares, adjoins the great Tsarskoye Selo Catherine Palace on the side of the parade ground courtyard. The Cameron Gallery was conceived as a place for strolls and philosophical conversations for Empress Catherine II. Its creator, Charles Cameron, treated the monumental steps with brilliant simplicity and embellished its buttresses with two colossal statues of Hercules and Flora, cast in bronze. Now in view is the great pond in the Catherine Park. Facing the pond is the Grotto Pavilion, whose construction was carried out in 1755-56 under Empress Elizabeth, but it was completed in the 1760s under Catherine II. The Turkish Bath Pavilion was erected on a small headland in the southwest part of the Great Pond between 1850 and 1852 on the orders of Emperor Nicholas I. The Hermitage Pavilion graces the Catherine Park to the southeast from the central axis of the palace. Pavilions like these were intended to enable the owners of the estate to rest from their official duties and immerse themselves in arts and sciences. The Hermitage kitchen had two functions, serving not only as a kitchen but also as an entrance gate to the Catherine Park, often referred to as the Red Gate. The Chinese bridge was built from pink granite. Its parapet is formed by tall, elegant vases decorated with 4 figures of Chinamen seated on stone pedestals. In view, the Arsenal Pavilion, monument to Alexander Pushkin. The Znamenskaya Church. The fountains of Peterhof were intrinsic to Peter the Great's original plans for Peterhof and are one of Russia's most famous tourist attractions, drawing millions of visitors every year. The palace and park at Peterhof are often referred to as the Russian Versailles. The most famous ensemble of fountains, the Grand Cascade, which runs from the northern facade of the Grand Palace to the Marine Canal, comprises 64 different fountains and over 200 bronze statues, bas-reliefs and other decorations. At the center stands Rastretti's spectacular statue of Samson wrestling the jaws of a lion. The vista of the Grand Cascade with the Grand Palace behind it, the first sight to visitors who arrive in Peterhof by sea, is truly breathtaking. The Pug Dog Chasing Ducks fountain is one of the many popular joke fountains located on the lower grounds of Peterhof. The State Hermitage Museum is St. Petersburg's most popular visitor attraction and one of the world's largest and most prestigious museums. The principal or Jordan staircase of the Winter Palace is so called because on the Feast of the Epiphany, the Tsar descended this imperial staircase in state for the ceremony of the blessing of the waters of the Neva River, a celebration of Christ's baptism in the Jordan River. The staircase is one of the few parts of the palace retaining the original 18th century style. The massive grey granite columns, however, were added in the mid-19th century. The Field Marshal's room, decorated by ormolu chandeliers. The Peter the Great's small throne room, also known as the Peter the Great Memorial Hall, was created for the Tsar Nicholas I in 1833 by the architect Auguste de Montferrand. The Armorial Hall is a vast chamber originally designed for official ceremonies. The War Gallery of 1812 was created in 1826 to commemorate Russia's victory over Napoleonic France. Its walls carry 332 portraits of generals who fought in the War of 1812 and the foreign campaign of 1813-14. St. George's Hall, also referred to as the Great Throne Room, is one of the largest state rooms in the Winter Palace, which served as the palace's principal throne room. Most historically, it was the setting of the opening of the First State Duma by Nicholas II in 1906. The Pavilion Hall in the small Hermitage was created in the middle of the 19th century. The interior is rendered particularly striking by the combination of light-colored marble with gilded moldings and the fine gleam of the crystal glass chandeliers. The hall houses the famous peacock clock, James Cox, 1770s, acquired by Catherine II. Room of Italian art of the 13th to early 15th century. The Leonardo da Vinci Room. The Raphael Loggias. The Majolica Room. The Italian Cabinet. The small Italian skylight room. The large Italian skylight room. The small Spanish skylight room. The Spanish Cabinet. The Rembrandt Room. The 20-column hall. Room of the Great Vase. Then it was time to say goodbye to St. Petersburg. Video clips captured as the Costa Pacifica sailed towards Tallinn in Estonia.